Lately, I feel like a fake Christian. Lately, I've been really condemning myself a lot. Thoughts like, oh, you're not a real Christian. Now you should be doing better. How come you're not following God like you're supposed to be? How come you're not doing, like that brother, like that sister? How come you're not doing enough? You have to prove yourself. Thoughts like these have been arising a lot, and it's just heavy, and I don't know, somewhere along the way, there's always a deep desire to have to prove myself, to, you know, make, to show God or prove to God that I'm worthy. And maybe it's the athlete in me, that I have to unlearn. But I always need the reminder, that it was never about performance. It was never about how good or how bad we do. The basis was always on what Jesus did for us. And I always forget that, you know, uh, it's not coming from a place of love anymore, right? Instead of an overflow, it then starts to come from a place of needing to prove, wanting to show. And, that's when I got reminded of this verse, Matthew 10:22. And I think you guys know it. It says, "And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that endureth to the end shall be saved." So, at face value, I always thought that I had to be the one to endure, that I had to be the strong one, to willpower it out. But when I read it in context, when I read the whole chapter in context, then I actually realized what it was actually trying to say. So, this word endure, in the original Greek, that word is hypomeno. And hypomeno is consisted of two words. Hypo, meno. Hypo means under or beneath. Meno means to stay, to abide, to not move away. So in this context, enduring means what? Staying under, abiding in, not moving away from the gospel. Because it is the gospel that endures for us. It is not us who has to endure, who has to use our strength, but our task is to simply stick to the gospel. And it's the gospel that endures for us. And when I, finally understood that, by the grace of God, it just gave me so much rest in my heart. All the pressure was just laid off because it was a reminder, Raf, it's not about you. You don't gotta prove anything. And reading the chapter in context, Jesus was telling his disciples to go and preach the gospel, all over Israel. And they will, because of that, Jesus gave them, authority to raise the dead, heal the sick, cast out devils and things like that. But the most important thing, the most crucial part of that was the first part, which is go and preach the gospel. Because it is the gospel that has the power to raise the dead. It is the gospel that has the power to heal the sick. It is the gospel that has the power to save, to redeem, to cast out devils. It's not in our ability, no. It's in the power of the gospel. Because the power of the gospel, at the core, is Jesus. And Jesus got all the power. You know what I mean? And then, I really related to what came after, those early verses. And basically, Jesus was telling his disciples to be ready to face rejection, persecution, to be hated for the gospel. And Jesus was telling them that if they get rejected, if they get hated, if they get persecuted, It's not really them that is getting hated. Rather, it's the gospel, is the message of Jesus that is getting hated. And, because of that persecution that Jesus was preparing them for, then came in the verse, Matthew 10:22, where it says, "And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that endureth to the end shall be saved." So now reading this in context, right? Enduring means staying under, abiding in, and not moving away from the gospel, because it is the gospel that actually has the power to save, to redeem, to heal, to cast out. We don't got the power, but it is the message that we preach, it's the message that we share, which at the core is Jesus, and that has the power, and not in us. And I think somewhere along the way as well, I forgot, just how much, just how lacking I am, just how unqualified I am. I think somewhere along the way, I thought that I could do it now. Okay, I'm a Christian now, I got the gospel, I got my platforms, I can do it all now. But I forgot that I can't do anything. I can't do anything without Jesus. I forgot the fact that Jesus had to pull me out so deep out of the water because I couldn't do anything on my own. I could only drown. And I forgot that. And now I think that I can do it all on my own. I think I can preach the gospel, which I have been trying to. For the longest time, I've had this desire to share the gospel with the people in my university. And I know that's not my heart, right? That's not mine, because I never cared about people like that. I never cared about God like that. But somehow, God's stirring my heart to do that. But the method, right, the mindset going into it was wrong. Because instead of having compassion for people, instead of thinking about people, instead of thinking about Jesus, I thought about myself. How much I can prove, how much I can gain, right? How good I can be. And, it's been tough, right? There's been a lot of humbling. There's been a lot of pains and struggles that went with that. But wow, by God's grace, I realize now, it was never about me. Even enduring was never about me. Everything has always been about the gospel. And it's really stepping outside of myself. Because when I think about sharing the gospel with people, right, it's always me at the center of it. Oh, I'm scared. Oh, what if they reject me? Oh, I'm anxious. I'm nervous. Oh, what will they say about me? It's always me. But it's never been about, man, what's God's heart? It's never, man, how does that person live without Jesus? And in that way, just that shift in the heart, it really goes a long way. Because now it's not me having to prove something, it's now me serving them. And just as Jesus did, Jesus didn't come to be served, he came to serve. He had all the power and authority to tell everyone to bow down to him, right, to serve him. But he was the one who loved and served people. And man, it really shows just how selfish and self-centered I am. But, amen. Because, hey, God allowed this to happen. God allowed these struggles, these problems, this condemnation to happen. For what? To help me realize this, to help me realign that, I'm not at the center of it. Jesus is at the center. And it should always come from a point of thinking about the heart of other people, thinking about God's heart, thinking about the hearts of people we encounter. Why? Because this gospel, this message has changed my life from a person who was depressed, who was going to take his life, who had no identity, who was lost, who was broken, now is redeemed, made whole, has peace, is happy, all because of Jesus and the gospel. That is always the most important thing. And that should be the center line.